What is the shape of your problem? Well, the shape of mine is trying to get this piece of plastic off of this thing and trying to find that. They sealed it all the way down. There we go. I hate it when they do that. This is a question that is posited in one of the classes at Wizard Academy called Da Vinci and the 40 Answers. And it is a class founded by Mark Fox, who was the youngest engineer on the NASA Space Shuttle program back in the Challenger era, and who wrote a book called Da Vinci and the 40 Answers, as in Leonardo da Vinci. And he co-taught a class with Roy and now with me, and now with some other instructors, Vi Wickham and Christina Grecianu. And it's based on the idea of this Russian problem-solving technique called TRIZ, T-R-I-Z. It was posited by the Russian inventor and science fiction author Heinrich Altschuler, and he was an inventor who ended up being co-opted into the patent department in the Russian government. And as he was approving patents and studying all of these solutions that people were filing, he noticed that no matter how many problems people tried to solve, the solutions were all pretty overlapping. There was only a handful of solutions, and he ended up counting 40, and he created what he called the 40 lenses, the 40 possible solutions to all problems. How is that possible, you say, with all the complexity of life? Well, the short answer is they're very big, large picture umbrella lenses. That's how. But I'm going to give you some examples. So, for example, how do you take a 1 mile long metal vehicle and have it move through a city on curves and through buildings and around areas of town? Well, that answer is lens 1, which is segmentation is a solution. It means you break that 1 mile long metal vehicle up into pieces, attach them, and it's called a train. And now you can move around curves and angles inside of small spaces, relatively speaking, right? Segmentation is also the solution that resulted in the assembly line for auto manufacturing and then food and all other manufacturing, really. The assembly line is, instead of having one person sit down and build a car, let's have 100 people build one piece of the car at a time as it goes through. Break up the assembly of the car into pieces, have people focus on only certain things, and then blow through. Instead of 20 full-time mechanics building a car, you have 150 people who know how to do one screw, and they make 100 cars in a week. Right? Well, or it depends on the year. Lens 4, I'll give you another example. Lens 4 is asymmetry is a solution, which is take something that's symmetrical and make it asymmetrical to solve the problem. What's an example of that? What do you do when you have a company that's big enough that it has multiple departments and you need to handle bonuses? But not everybody is in an income-producing department. So not everyone's in sales. Some people are in bookkeeping, right? And so you can't have a perfectly symmetrical bonus structure based on income and product creation and marketing. You have to take a symmetrical, level playing field and make it asymmetrical, where your things are based on this and your percentages are based on this and your things, and that's called asymmetrical problem solving, right? That's in the TRIZ system. That's lens 4. Asymmetry is an example of a solution. Do it backwards is one of the lenses. Let's do it backwards. Right? Instead of doing it this way, let's do it this way. Instead of assembling a piece of furniture and then trying to move it into your house, let's move the furniture into the house and then assemble it. It's called IKEA, right? Which is also segmentation. And so a lot of these solutions, like they have overlapping, like color change, and asymmetry can also be segmentation, and there's a lot of interpretation in these things. But in general, it's this idea of overview problem solving. Now, everybody in the world tends to have a default way that they solve problems, which means, but based on personality and temperament and history and training or education, when you encounter problems, you probably have a default 1 or 2 ways that you tend to just generically try to handle things. If you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? The beauty of a system like TRIZ is that you don't have to become naturally good at the 40 biggest possible ways of solving problems. You can just sit down with the team and with this system and say, here's our problem. Let's look at all 40 lenses and see if there's anything in here that could solve the problem that we're having. This is literally the whole point of Wizard Academy. We try to take what intuitively talented people do naturally, teach you why it works, and then show you how to implement it in a calculated, intentional way, regardless of whether or not you have the talent. And this is one of the foundational beliefs of the Wizard Academy Business School. The next class on this is in October, by the way, if you have any desire to attend. That's part one. Let's drink some Green River, and then we'll talk about part two. So, Green River is a distillery. You may have heard in the early days of the brand and the company, this was the O.Z. Tyler brand. Was it Terracentia, I think, was the company that owned them? And then they renamed themselves Green River. Why? Because they were buying and they were on the location of the original Green River distillery. That's a pre-prohibition distillery, pre-prohibition Kentucky license number 10. And so they sort of returned to their roots at the exact same location that, and they had to rehab all these buildings. So there was all these old decrepit buildings. They had to renovate and modernize the entire place. But the really cool thing is it's all still active now. They're actively reusing and revitalizing the original buildings. Now, since then, they've been bought by Bardstown, so they're now a Bardstown brand, but they're distilling their own whiskeys, and this one is the Wheated Bourbon. Don't know how old it is, which means it's at least 4 in theory, because it's a straight wheated bourbon with no age statement. That means it's at least 4. They're using a copper column still. They have the capacity for 90,000 barrels annually, maybe more. This is cool. 3-story clay tile rickhouse. It smells, what am I smelling? I was sitting with it to try to figure it out. I'm getting this like soft cherry, okay, you wouldn't know this. This is maybe a bad reference. In Texas, we have kolaches. Kolaches are a pastry with a fruit middle. And it's not stuffed. It's a pastry that's kind of like raised on the edges and sunk down in the middle. And in that little sunken down space, there's a fruit filling or a cream cheese filling or maybe chocolate or something like that. And those are called kolaches. If it's meat filled, that's called a kablansk, technically, if you want to be a nerd about it. But that's called a kolache. It's a Czech pastry. And Texas, there's a lot of cities in Texas that have Czech history or German heritage or Czech heritage. And this reminds me of a cherry cream kolache with a little bit of an apricot note, and then it's a lot of oak and caramel. It smells very soft, very nice. It's great. It's home plate bourbon. I mean, that's the thing. So many of these, when you're in Kentucky and you're doing everything right on production, which these guys are, and you're doing everything right on barrel management and cask management, which these guys are, and you're releasing reasonable age statement whiskeys like 4 or 5 plus, like these guys are, what you end up creating is a really great Kentucky bourbon. Rarely does it cross the line into magnificent or truly remarkable at this range, because you're just doing all of the correct things to do in Kentucky bourbon, like all of the other correct Kentucky bourbon makers are doing. And so a lot of you end up making the same basic flavor profiles. I mean, this is up there with Maker's Mark or any of the other wheated bourbons, just classic Kentucky wheated bourbon with maybe a 10% variation from brand to brand on some of these things. If you were an AB lineup, you could probably pick them out, but from memory, it's just going to be like, yeah, that's just a good Kentucky bourbon. You get Bardstown doing stuff, and they're doing weird things and cask finishes and stave experiments and stuff like that. Sure, you might be able to get some interesting creative stuff going on, or you're playing around with yeast strains like Wilderness Trail. Sure, but when you're just making classic, column still Kentucky bourbon, well, that's it. That is a truly just straight down home plate, simple, not remarkable, but solid and good Kentucky bourbon. I know that sounds like death by faint praise, but I don't mean it that way. Sometimes you just want a Kentucky bourbon, and that's one right there. Palate, oak, vanilla cream, little caramel, soft tannic finish, but still sweet. Sweet black tea, hint of a cherry. Yeah, really good. Really good. 45%? Is that what I keep reading and then missing and turning back around? I'm gonna add a little water just to see what happens. Now, here's the other thing that you need to ask yourself when you're trying to problem solve. It is very often the case that the solution to your problem may not be in your industry. And so many times what so many business owners do is they spend all of their money going to conventions for their industry. You own a plumbing company, you go to the plumbing conventions. You own a hotel, you go to these, hospitality conventions. But if someone has really solved a really hard problem and figured something out, they're not going to share it with you there. You're a competitor. If, however, you can find an industry whose shape of their problems very often overlap the shape of your problem, you can go to that convention and everybody will tell you everything. Trade secrets galore, because you are not a competitor, you're not a threat. An example of this, you're a concert promoter. There's nothing worth less on the planet than a ticket to yesterday's concert. Right? That's about as worthless as it gets. And no one in the world has ever had that problem before. So this is unique to the concert industry. So you're going to go to concert conventions and you're going to go to music conventions and try to figure out how we solve this concert problem of tickets and high value, high value, high value, high value, zero value. Well, here's the thing. There's nothing worth less than a concert to last night's ticket, except maybe a seat on a plane flight that left already, or a hotel room that was empty last night, right? These are all different industries: airplane, travel, concert promotion, hospitality, but they have the identical problem shape. Very often you will find that somebody in another industry has solved your problem, and they will freely share that information with you if you can find them, especially if they're in a different industry, because you're not a threat. But you need to, before you can figure out where that is, you need to take a step back from the idea that you have this truly unique, unsolvable thing, and then you need to figure out what is the shape of this problem and who's solved it before. Where? Then go talk to those people. The water pushed the cherry and the fruit sweetness forward, and it made the palate more buttercream, more caramel, less interesting. It was better at 45. It's a good Kentucky bourbon. I hope that information on problem solving is helpful, and I'm really glad you're here. Cheers. Dry week is coming up. It's August 29th. It starts at noon on Friday, August 29th. It goes for a week and ends on Friday, September 5th at noon. This is something we do as a quarterly check-in to make sure that we're all good with our alcohol consumption, take a break, reset our palates. We would love to have you join. It's voluntary, and we will see you on the other side of it after this. If you like this kind of thing and this kind of vibe, like and subscribe.